Well, good morning and welcome to the First Unitarian Church as we gather to remember and to celebrate an extraordinary life. We doing okay back there? This community, which gathers here this morning, reflects a wide spectrum of the arts with which Muriel has been so intimately connected. We represent long, deep, and profoundly meaningful friendships cultivated over decades and vigorously maintained by Muriel until the end of her life. And we gather here this morning because we love her family. Married nearly half a century to Martin, we hold him gently in our hearts. And we want to communicate to Martin and to Patrick, to Ursula, to Becky, to Marek, to Dylan, that we too loved Muriel and understand the loss. Muriel will be remembered forever as a spitfire with flair and grace and elegance. When Muriel spoke, people listened, and sometimes they flinched, but she was always there for them. We could always count on her support for the underdog and for liberal causes struggling to make this society more fair and just. Muriel liked interesting people. She liked people with an edge, with a sense of humor, with spice in their souls. You must all be interesting people. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. We are very sad today, but we all know the heavy truth that our journeys in this wondrous life must someday end. And when we look at Muriel's life and remember her this morning with music and prayer and heartfelt words of admiration and love, 87 years of not just being alive, but riding life at full throttle, then we can take comfort that her life was truly blessed. We are humbly grateful for having known Muriel and for having shared with her some of life's excitement. Every Sunday morning at worship, we begin that worship hour in this church by lighting the chalice. It has come to symbolize the light of truth and freedom and a concern for all people. Muriel has been a force in this church since 1949. She loved this community, and we loved her. Her headstone will have an engraved chalice. This morning, I light the chalice in memory of Muriel Zwick.
I'd like to invite all of us into a moment of silence and meditation, turning our hearts to that which is most good and true and beautiful. And then I would like to offer some words. Let us pause in silence. In this hour of grief and sorrow, of sadness and loss, we gather in gratitude, grateful for the life that Muriel led among us, grateful for her spirit, her wit, her intellect, grateful for her heart like a lion's. May we who are yet here be soothed by the breeze of memories, remembering the times of joy and laughter, and the times of hardship and struggle that we all shared together. May our lives be enriched by her living, delighting in yet the rising of another day, the setting of another sun. May we look to the mountains as a symbol of her strength and determination. And may we ourselves partake of her wondrous zest for life, remembering to live each moment, to love each loved one, to speak the truth that lies within us. We who are here have been blessed by her fierce devotion to her family, to the causes that she believed in, and to this community. May we continue to be blessed by having her lived among us as we continue to live in the same spirit as she did. Amen.
I had a rather unfortunate experience this morning in that I wasn't, through all my efforts, able to get this to print, so much for a Stanford education. Most of my speech today will be about what I remember about my grandmother, and but more specifically, my remembrances with my grandparents, because to me they've always been inseparable. I can't think of one without thinking of the other, and I still can't. First of all, I'd like to say that for those of you who only know me from what you've heard from my grandmother, I'm sorry if I'm not what you expected. There are some reputations to which it's just impossible to live up. From the day I was born, my grandmother loved me unconditionally. She always saw the best in me, and she made me want to live up to it. Honestly, if I could see myself through anybody else's eyes, it would be through hers. I hope to one day see my grandchildren through the same eyes, because I know how very happy we made each other. The mind remembers best things that have a strong emotional connection. So it's not surprising that some of my earliest memories are of my grandmother. My favorite place to go when I was young was my grandparents' house. I could go there and find two people whose sole purpose, or so it seemed to me, was to make me happy. To the blissfully self-centered psyche of a 3-year-old, it was the only place in the world where everything made sense, and people behaved as they were supposed to. I still remember playing a game with my grandmother in which we'd declare a walk-in closet a school bus, and I would pretend to be the bus driver. She'd wait patiently outside the closet until I yelled, "All aboard the cool bus," and then she'd open the closet door and get on the bus for me to take her to school. My young mind failing to grasp the subtle irony of the situation. I really enjoyed that game, but I think she enjoyed it even more. When I got a little older, I began to realize that there was something truly different about Martin and Muriel. Most of my peers didn't understand how close I was to my grandparents. I honestly don't think I realized just how special our relationship was until this week. Most of my summer vacation trips were with them. Besides New York, San Francisco, and Yellowstone, we had annual trips to the Utah Shakespearean Festival for 7 years, and annual trips to Snowbird for longer than I can remember. We played quite a few games of three-handed bridge around the dining room table at Iron Blossom, room 1009. My grandpa usually winning, but my grandma frequently taking the hand. As I grew older, I was fortunate enough to get to know a different side of my grandparents. As I matured, my ability to love them only increased because I got to know them as not only grandparents, but as real people too. And my affection for them was only magnified by that knowledge. I remember before I went into 10th grade, we had to read a book called The Grapes of Wrath for my English class. And when I told my grandmother this, she went over to the bookshelf and got down a gray, old, and dusty book. She walked over to me and dusted off a little bit of what had accumulated there over the decades. and opened it up and flipped through some of the pages. She's turned to a specific chapter and told me that this book had actually changed her life, and that it was this book that was one of the major reasons she decided to become a labor organizer. And I talked with her for a while about it and about her life and what she had done. And she read me a chapter that I still remember as emphasizing the kind of joy and kindness that I associate with my grandmother. It was a simple 3-page chapter. It was a story that stood on its own about a migrant family who came into a store, and the children were looking at the candy there, but the candy was nickel candy, and the migrant father didn't have enough money to afford it. And the children kept asking him, "Daddy, is that 1 penny candy? Can we get them?" And the 2 children kept nagging their father, "We want some 1 penny candy. Can we get those? Can we get those?" And the father knew it was nickel candy, so he told them no. And then the children walked up to the woman behind the counter and they said, "Is that 1 penny candy?" And the woman said, "No, of course not. That's 2 for a penny candy." It was 3 pages, and she said it was the chapter that she remembered the most vividly. And I was honored that she was willing to read it to me. I still have that book. It's one of the few books that I keep in front of me at my desk at school. The only thing that amazed me more than my grandmother's love for me is the love that she had for the other people she knew and the love that she got from them in return. I know that she loved and was loved by every person in this room and by many, many others who aren't able to be here today. I think the problem with words is that we use positive adjectives too frequently, so when you want to say something truly important, it's really difficult. So I'm just going to say this. I love you, Kiki, and I always will. Thank you.
My grandmother had a great sense of humor. She always made me laugh. Every day, she told me, "If you don't like my jokes like some others, don't be my friend." And I loved her jokes. Every single one of them, the bad and the good. I'm greatly saddened by her death. When I was little, she and my grandfather we would all do great fun things together. For instance, every Easter, they would hide eggs all over their apartment with things inside of them. You see, they were plastic eggs, pink, yellow, all those colors. The things inside would vary from chocolate to quarters. And I just had a blast. I would go around their apartment, pulling out the various eggs, finding them, and she would tell me if I was warm or cold, seeing how close I was to an egg. And it was one of the most fun things I had to do when I was 7 years old. Another great thing she did is that we would play a game, not like Dylan's bus game, but we would do a game called Toast Sandwiches. And this is a game we played where she would pretend to garnish my toes by tickling them while reciting her favorite condiments and putting them on. Then when she was all done, she would gently bite my big toe. I'm proud to say that one of the last things that happened before she went into her 2-day semi-coma was that she witnessed my award-winning chaplain performance. You see, there was a history fair in my school where people would choose characters from history and make backdrops, research them, and present them. I wrote a 10-minute monologue on Charlie Chaplin, memorized it in 4 days and won first place. And the most satisfaction I got out of it was to make my dear grandmother smile for perhaps the last time. I truly loved her. We had great things together. I would just ask her questions about her life and past times, and she'd tell me stories, wise stories that made sense to me. She could clear any moment by just telling me something that happened to her earlier. She had lived through so much and knew so much, and I learned from her so much. I love my grandmother.
I'm not my mother, I'm her daughter, Susan. But I'm going to read her words the way she wrote them, rather than changing anything, okay? How does one say a few words about a friend? Muriel was a friend from the day that we arrived in Salt Lake City 36 years ago. It was a very active time for the orchestra as they prepared for their first European tour. And of course, we as wives had to prepare too. You know, they used to say, join the Navy and see the world. We could add, marry a musician and see the world. And that was a lifestyle that Muriel and I shared. Martin and Oscar knew each other from earlier years when they were both in the Stokowski Youth Orchestra, and so we fell into a friendship based on mutual interests and activities. Though Muriel and I did not play in the orchestra, we played with them. Though the tours were serious work for them, it was wonderful adventure too, and when we could, we would explore the places we visited. It was great fun, filled with stimulating experiences. Muriel was a very gifted person. She had a way with words that she used elegantly and humorously. Her many skills led her into all kinds of activities. She was very successful with her position as manager of Friendship Manor, which was among the first of the assisted living homes for people who needed assistance. At the same time, she was always aware of the many activities in the art world, be it music, dance, theater, or visual arts. She actively supported all the groups like the Symphony Guild, the Opera Guild, and all of the performing groups and artists, helping them to build an audience in Salt Lake City. Also, her interest in worldly events had her speaking out for worthy causes. Muriel was a party girl too. She loved giving them, was a wonderful hostess, and loved going to them. She was indeed a combination of serious and playful qualities. The last social event we had together was my mother's birthday party a month ago. She was very ill, but she was determined to attend. She got herself together, and though her strength was limited, her presence was something I shall always remember as a wonderful expression of love and friendship and a great effort to hold on to life. But above all, there were 4 major loves in her life: Martin, Patrick, Dylan, Merrick. She was so proud of them and enjoyed every moment with them and all of their successes. She lived a full life, and we'll remember her and we'll miss her. Thank you.
It was in early December at the Women's Alliance Christmas luncheon that I had the pleasure of circulating among the women of the Alliance in a chit-chatty kind of way. And I remember Muriel sitting at a table, and I said to you, as a matter of course, "Muriel, how are you?" And she said, "You know, I'm dying." Well, Muriel has always been quite frank in her conversations. In fact, I consider her the queen of candor. But for this, I was unprepared. My shock must have been transparent because she offered me the chair next to her. And we talked deeply, despite the din of merriment in the background. After we got through her anger, and I must say amusement at the absurdity that health insurance refused to cover necessary procedures that could help her in the present situation, insisting instead on waiting until she was at death's door before they would give her the procedures. So after we finished that little bit of lunacy, we got to the heart of the matter. "I'm dying," she reiterated, "and that's okay. I've had a long and wonderful life. It's time." It's as though she was honoring a contract. A contract we all have, but think about seldom. Time was up. She was ready and had no regrets. What a gift to reach that point in your life. In one of my hospital visits to Muriel, I was there in one of those rare moments when she had no other visitors. We spoke freely. It was a very warm conversation. And suddenly she said, "Come closer. I want to hold hands with you." I pulled a chair to the bedside, and we held hands. And she said to me, "You know, I had some difficulty with you when you first came to Salt Lake City." Well, I knew I could count on Muriel, to be candid. And then she followed with, "And now I want to hold your hand." She was stifling some laughter when she said, "Well, I guess that's an improvement." And we both laughed. But we never let go of each other's hand. There was a very magical moment. Holding hands, it felt like forever, transcending the stuff of ordinary, everyday life and touching upon deeper levels of human understanding. Muriel's reflection on her life, so she was so thankful for her good fortunes, her marriage to Martin. She still recognized the need for it to be over. The time had come. And in conversation with her, she reminded me of a very slim volume written by Frank Kermode, who's a professor both at Harvard and at Cambridge University. And this little slim volume is called The Sense of an Ending. Briefly put, Kermode reminds us of the two meanings or senses, the two senses of the word end. The first understanding, the first sense of the word is finished, done, complete, over. It's what we see at the end of films, the end. It's what we see at the end of pretentious novels, fini. It is what we say in the face of death. Her life has come to an end. Kermode's other sense, however, is equally important. For end, in this sense, means to have achieved what was intended. It means a sense of accomplishment or purpose fulfilled or destiny reached or something fully and finally done. And thus the sense of an ending has to do with both conclusion and achievement. It provokes a wonderful ambiguity. On the one hand, end is merely another word for it's over, but then on the other hand, there comes a sense of end as that ultimate purpose towards which we aspire, which is not over until it is over. The end is to have done what we were meant to do. Muriel's life did not just end. It was a life ended with a purpose fulfilled. Conclusion and achievement. That concept lifts our spirit. It brings comfort to our sorrow. It enables us to remember Muriel with gladness, and also to honor her wisdom. It was time.
Dad, Ursula, Marek, Dylan, Sylvia, Tom, speakers, musicians, friends. Thanks for being here today to honor my mother, Muriel Zwick. As one would expect, this last week I've thought a lot about death, relationships, my mother, and this wonderful family I'm so fortunate to be a part of. Several times when I've awakened, I see a wolf's head with piercing blue eyes in the upper left corner of my peripheral vision. I think this is my death head's mask, with its icy, transparent stare and utter stillness. More startling than frightening. I feel that I've stumbled into an ancient Indian burial ground and that some rites are expected of me, and I'm not sure I know how to perform them. At first, I feared facing this day. I was unsure of what I wanted to say. I was confused about approaching loss, grief, remembrance, appraising my relationship with my mother, and celebrating her full life that was so well lived. Though my mother was a brilliant woman who gave much of her substance to this church and various civic and artistic organizations, these were not the things that I thought much about. I was thinking more about my mother's relationship with my dad, my wife, the 2 grandsons, and me. I've thought about closeness and anger and hurt, the mistakes that I made, that she made, and I've thought about forgiveness. I've thought a lot about forgiveness. Today I look at the crazy quilt that is the Zwick family, forgiving and asking to be forgiven, not just by my mother, but by all of you. There have been wonderful times of great happiness, and there have also been times of anger and despair. Wounds have been given and received. I hope most of them are healed, but would like to continue healing any that remain today. Maybe healing is just persevering, hanging in there, not giving up. I've always had to do my own living of my own life, and I think the same was true of my mother. Others people's insights generally turn to so much psychobabble for me, and my wife is the one who ends up reading all the great books of psychology that have been recommended over the years. So family, be healed, be kind, forgive. We still have a way to walk together. We need one another. We need to succor Marty, most of all, in this time of great loss. His passion is beautiful to behold. No greater honor could be given my mother than the love of her wonderful husband. We need to take very good care of him now as he did her. So on we go. Life's ultimate meaning, elusive as ever. In the next chapter, I'm hoping Tom will explain postmodernism and debunk a few of the grand narratives. We won't want to miss that. We'll get through this time and be the wiser and the kinder for it. We're ready to meet the trials that still lie before us. Thank you, dear friends and hospice providers who made my mother's last days so comfortable. Ursula, Sylvia, Stephanie, and many other radiant souls. Bless you, wonderful ones. The loss of one's mother can certainly test the sincerity of a humanist like me. This is certainly a time when one of the grand narratives might offer comfort. I've always felt that my mother was a latent Christian, and though I think her flame has ceased its flicker, I would be quite pleased if her spirit is with us today. 18 years ago, Dick Henry asked me to make some Mother's Day remarks to honor my mother. I did, and I would like to share them with you. Mother's Day remarks, May 13th, 1984. I think my mother, Muriel Zwick, has been living in fear all week about what I'd say this morning, no doubt thinking that I would draw heavily from the chapter on momism in Philip Wiley's Generation of Vipers for my remarks about mothers today. Well, Mother dear, put your fears at rest. Since Reverend Henry's invitation to address a few remarks about you, my mind has been filled with many warm memories about our relationship and a great sense of pride in the numerous accomplishments you have achieved in your lifetime. On the lighter side, as a writer and a contest enterer, you have always kept the backyard full of charcoal broilers. And how well I remember our 1 week in Winnemucca, First prize in a local contest. Second prize being 2 weeks in Winnemucca. Your involvement with the League of Women Voters, the ballet, the symphony, and most of all, the outstanding way you ran Friendship Manor for so many years are a few of the things that make me very proud to be your son. As a working mother, you have met the challenges of the changing role of a woman in our society with a success that none could deny. Whatever you have addressed yourself to has had the benefit of your wit, intelligence, and style. As your son this Mother's Day, I feel a lot of thank yous are in order. Thank yous for your love and loyalty, your friendship. Thank yous for the music lessons, the instruments, the trips abroad to study, and maybe most of all, thank you for being a Unitarian. As nice as the material largesse and emotional security I have received from you may be, the legacy that this son values most is the intellectual toughness and humanist perspective that I have had the good fortune to grow up in. The conversations, the shared books, your passion for what would seem to be the best that man has done so far in all areas of his endeavors, and your own doing of your own best have provided me with a fine example of what being a first-rate human being is all about. I love you, I like you, and I'm proud of you. Happy Mother's Day. My feelings haven't changed. I think it's time to say goodbye. You will always be with me, Mother. I hope I can give your best to Ursula, Marek, and Dylan. I'll take very good care of Marty. His example of how that's done couldn't be better. Thank you for bringing him into our lives and for giving me mine.
There's a certain disadvantage in speaking last. There seems to be little that is left unsaid, no achievement unspoken, no gesture uncovered, but there's also something that is an advantage in that I can say to Dylan and to Marek, I think that you proved your grandmother absolutely right this morning. Absolutely. And to Patrick, what I would like to say is that your mother had one regret and one regret only, and I think that that was put to rest. She told me once that she wished she had been a better mother to you, and today you have laid that to rest. A woman like Muriel, there's always something more to be said because she filled her world, and then some. What I loved about Muriel, among the many other things mentioned, was how she carried herself and how she carried on. Remember that Muriel was of a generation where the women wore white gloves, where they were supposed to murmur delicately, would never be seen in public without being perfectly groomed. And so she was. Elegant, well turned out, outfits of silk, accessorized perfectly with matching jewelry and the shoes. The silver shoes, the gold shoes, the teal shoes. I was so jealous. Muriel was a woman of real elegance, and she was regal. She made appearances. She didn't come into the room. She appeared in it, and if you didn't know her, some people might be intimidated by her presence. But yet, once you heard what came out of her mouth, you couldn't help but laugh and then fall in love with her. I was the recipient of one such moment one Sunday, and I think that's when she got me, and she got me good. Tom and I had done one of our shared services that we do every year, and Martin and Muriel and I were standing over there, and Tom was over here with someone else, and we were doing the usual pleasantries. And Martin walks away, and Muriel looks at him with just these eyes and turns to me and says, I'm really lucky, you know. He's such a good cook. We have so much fun together in the kitchen drinking wine while he cooks for me. And then she paused for a moment and added in that Muriel way that I can't quite do because I am certainly not her. She says, and he's got buns of steel. Oh, thank you, Muriel. I did ask Martin permission to share this story. And he says, well, if that's how she felt. Theirs was indeed a union and a partnership made in heaven, and that is just an expression. Because as she would say, it's all a mystery. They lived their heaven here together. Muriel and Martin traveled not only around the world, but also here in Salt Lake City through music and art. Martin and Muriel were equal partners in life's adventures. And two of the most important adventures they undertook seriously was the nurture and growth of their grandsons, Dylan and Marek. No visit would go by that Muriel did not brag about each of them, how talented, how affectionate, how superlative they were in every way. And she should know, of course, because she and Martin took them to faraway places, sharing their love of culture, but most importantly, from the moment that each child was born, simply sharing their love. Muriel had the gift of having multiple daughters-in-law, and we know what a stereotype that could be. And we also know that Muriel was no stereotype. I don't really know whether Ursula or Becky know how much she loved them. Muriel would often tell me, Ursula is so wonderful. She takes such good care of Patrick and Marek, insinuating perhaps that maybe it wasn't that easy to take care of Patrick, but that she certainly appreciated it. And she does so much for so many people. And I would like to think that in some way that Muriel was seeing her own strength in Ursula. I think with Becky, she shared Becky's sparkle and gregariousness. She would talk with great relish about the years with Becky and Dylan, grateful for the opportunity to care for Dylan as a young child and delighting in Becky's generosity, her talent, and if I may, her antics. She was no less grateful for the many people who came to her during her last weeks of life. Muriel would tell me, we're so lucky to be part of this church. They're so good to me. And I know for those who were able to be there, the gift was being in her presence. As she entertained each visitor with stories, sharing her love of life until the moment she died. And if you can imagine Muriel, hooked up as she was in her satin regalia, entertaining the caregivers, you can imagine what a great gift she gave. Muriel was a beautiful woman, a real mensch. We too can aspire to this kind of beauty which derives from living authentically, with hope, with optimism, and with great gratitude for life itself. In one of her last days, she asked, imperiously perhaps, for a glass of juice. And standing by the armchair that looked over the city as she always stood, she took a sip of it and said, this is a good moment to be alive. May we too cherish each moment. As we continue to be sad and to mourn and to grieve and to remember and to laugh, let us go into each moment that comes renewed and inspired by her life, lived fully and truly. May our grief be tempered by time, and our comfort be found in the company of one another. Amen. After the postlude, the family invites you to join in a reception in Elliott Hall, hosted by the Women's Alliance, recipient of Muriel's love, dedication, and energy, and also hosted by Tony Caputo's, a part of Muriel's and Martin's extensive family.